Let me guess. You've got goals. Maybe it's starting a business, getting in shape, learning a language, writing a book. Something that's been on your mind for weeks, months, maybe even years. And yet every time you get ready to start, there's this one sentence that sneaks in and stops you cold. I just need to feel more motivated. Sound familiar? We've all been there, sitting on the edge of our ambitions, waiting for that spark, that magical burst of motivation to finally kick us into gear. We watch a few motivational videos, scroll through inspiring quotes, maybe even get a little excited for a minute. But then, life happens. Distractions creep in, energy dips, and before we know it, we're back in that same place, telling ourselves the same story. I wish I was more motivated. But here's the truth most people don't realize. Motivation is wildly overrated, seriously. You don't need more motivation. What you really need is something else entirely, something much more powerful, something you can actually rely on. Because let's face it, motivation is like a sugar rush. It feels amazing when it's there, but it crashes fast. It's unpredictable, it's emotional, and worst of all, it disappears exactly when you need it the most. You don't want your success depending on something that's as flaky as your Wi-Fi on a stormy day. So what do you need instead? That's what we're going to uncover together in this video. I'm going to walk you through a simple but powerful shift in thinking that can completely change the way you approach your goals. You'll learn why chasing motivation is keeping you stuck, and how a few mindset tweaks and one game-changing habit can help you finally break out of that loop. Now, before we dive into the solution, let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how some people just do the thing? They don't seem super inspired or pumped up all the time, but somehow they show up day after day, even when they're tired, even when life is busy, even when no one's watching. How do they do that? It's not because they have more motivation than you. It's because they've built something better. Momentum, systems, identity. That's what we're really going to talk about here. The stuff that actually sticks. But don't worry, I'm not about to hit you with some cold, robotic discipline equals freedom lecture. This isn't about being perfect or grinding 24/7. This is about understanding your brain a little better and working with it, not against it. Let me tell you a quick story. A few years ago, I had this idea for a project I really cared about. I was so excited in the beginning, and for a few days, I was on fire. Then I hit a wall. I didn't feel like working on it, so I waited for motivation to come back, and I waited and waited. Spoiler alert, it didn't. That's when I realized I didn't have a motivation problem. I had a momentum problem. That was the turning point. So in this video, we're going to break that cycle. You'll learn how to stop waiting for motivation and start creating a rhythm that carries you, even when you don't feel like it. And once you get that rhythm going, that's when everything starts to feel easier. The resistance gets smaller, the habits start to stick. And yes, ironically, that's when motivation starts to show up more often. But now it's just a bonus, not the fuel. Ready to see what that looks like? So now that we've agreed motivation isn't the hero we thought it was, let's talk about what actually works. Because when motivation fades, and it will, you need something sturdier to lean on. And that something is structure. Not rigid, soul-crushing structure. I'm talking about a rhythm that supports you even on your most unmotivated days. The kind of setup that makes doing the right thing easier than avoiding it. Think of it like brushing your teeth. You don't wait until you're super inspired to do it, right? It's just built into your day. That's the kind of structure we're aiming for. Natural, repeatable, and low effort to maintain. One of the biggest energy shifts you can make is moving from trying to feel ready to building systems that make action automatic. Because the truth is, action creates motivation, not the other way around. The moment you start doing something, anything, your brain begins to catch up. It's like inertia. A body in motion tends to stay in motion. The hardest part is just starting. And here's where the brain plays tricks on us. We assume we need to want to do the thing before we do it. But that's just not how it works. Wanting is optional. Starting is everything. Think about something you've been putting off. Maybe it's going for a run, writing that article, or organizing your space. You've probably had the thought, I'll do it when I feel more up to it. But what if the moment you stood up, tied your shoes, and stepped outside, that's when the motivation hit? Not before, not during the scroll session, but right after you started. It's a weird little secret of human behavior. Doing the thing leads to wanting to do the thing. So how do we use that? We start by shrinking the resistance. If a task feels too big, too vague, or too intimidating, your brain will come up with 100 creative excuses not to do it. That's why motivation disappears. It's your brain trying to protect you from overwhelm. But if you make the task so small that it feels almost silly to avoid, you sneak past that resistance. That's why I love what some people call the 2-minute rule. You don't have to clean your whole kitchen. Just put one dish in the sink. You don't have to write an entire essay. Just open the document. These tiny moves sound pointless, but they're everything. Because the real goal isn't to accomplish something huge in that moment. It's to start. Starting builds momentum, and momentum makes action feel natural. And once you have even a tiny bit of momentum, suddenly the mountain doesn't feel quite so steep anymore. But here's the part most people miss. Consistency beats intensity. One small action repeated daily will always take you further than bursts of motivation that fizzle out after a week. You don't need to crush every workout. You don't need to write 1,000 words a day. You just need to keep showing up in small, sustainable ways. Let's go back to that friend you know, the one who always seems to be moving forward. They're not superhuman. They're not powered by endless motivation. What they've done, consciously or not, is create a loop, a tiny habit, a small win, a little pride. Repeat. That's what you want. A system that rewards effort, not perfection. Something that keeps you engaged even when your emotional battery's running low. So instead of chasing inspiration, what if you chase consistency? What if you stopped asking, "Do I feel like it?" and started asking, "What's the smallest version of this that I can do today?" That one question alone can change everything. And in the next part, we'll talk about how to make that consistency stick. Not just for a few days, but in a way that actually changes how you see yourself. Because the ultimate goal here isn't just doing more. It's becoming the kind of person who follows through. All right, so now that we've established that consistency and small, simple actions are the key to breaking the motivation cycle, let's take it a step further. Because here's where things really start to change. You need to shift how you see yourself. In fact, that might be the most important part of this entire process. The truth is, the most successful people aren't necessarily the most motivated. They're the ones who have built a strong sense of identity around the things they do. They've become the kind of person who doesn't need to feel motivated to do the work. They do it because it's who they are. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. They set goals, they make plans, but they forget to ask themselves one fundamental question. Who do I want to be? Think about it. How often have you said to yourself, "I want to run a marathon," or "I want to be a writer," or "I want to be a healthy eater"? But deep down, you're still seeing yourself as the person who can't run, or the person who never finishes projects, or the one who always reaches for the chips instead of the salad. If you keep thinking of yourself as someone who struggles with these things, that's exactly what will happen. Here's a simple example. If you see yourself as a lazy person, your brain is going to find evidence that reinforces that belief. It will point to every time you procrastinated, skipped a workout, or didn't get something done. That's your identity at work. Your brain is always looking for proof of who you believe you are. But what if you started seeing yourself as someone who takes action, or as someone who follows through, or as someone who makes progress every day, even if it's just a little bit? When you shift your identity, everything else starts to follow. Instead of waiting for motivation, you start to show up because that's what the person you're becoming does. You don't need to talk yourself into it. It's automatic. It's part of who you are. Here's how it works. You start small, right? But as you build those tiny, consistent habits, you get evidence that you can do it. And every time you succeed, even in small ways, it reinforces your new identity. You're becoming the person who works out every morning. You're becoming the person who writes every day. You're becoming the person who eats healthier, not because you're trying to be good, but because that's just who you are now. Let me ask you something. How many times have you tried to push through a task, only to feel like you're forcing it? Maybe you're doing it because you think you should, or because you want to get the reward at the end. But if you're constantly pushing against the grain, it's exhausting, isn't it? That's why building a new identity around the habits you want to create is so much more powerful. It's not about effort, it's about alignment. When your actions align with the kind of person you want to be, things feel more effortless. The consistency comes naturally. You don't have to force yourself to want it because now it's who you are. So how do you make this shift? You start by affirming your new identity every single day. Don't wait for motivation to tell you you're ready. Take action and let your actions build your new identity. You could say things like, I am the kind of person who works out every morning, or I am the kind of person who finishes what I start. These aren't just affirmations, they're commitments. And over time, they will be reinforced by the tiny actions you're taking every day. You know, this is why people talk about small wins all the time. They're not just about celebrating accomplishments. They're about reinforcing the new identity that comes with them. Each time you finish something, no matter how small, you're telling yourself, I am the kind of person who does this. Now here's the kicker. Once this shift happens, you don't need to wait for motivation anymore. The work gets done because that's who you are. You show up even when you don't feel like it, because consistency and small actions have created a new you. A version of you that doesn't need external motivation to take action. So, to wrap this up, it's not about motivation. It's not about hoping for the perfect moment or waiting to feel like doing the thing. It's about building consistency through small, repeatable actions. It's about creating an identity that aligns with the goals you want to achieve. And the more you show up, the more that identity becomes part of who you are. If you want to build a habit, make it so small that you can't fail. If you want to make that habit stick, do it every day. And if you want to feel like you're getting somewhere, remember, your identity will shift with every small action you take. And with that shift, you'll find that motivation becomes a nice bonus. Something that shows up once the momentum is already there, not something you have to chase down. Remember, you've got this. The hardest part is always the first step, but once you're in motion, it becomes easier than you think. And it's not about being perfect, it's about being consistent. So take that first small step today and start becoming the person you want to be. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and of course, subscribe for more helpful tips. You've got what it takes, and I'm cheering you on every step of the way. Stay consistent and keep moving forward.